Archie's Christmas Stocking, issue 190. Dilton hides in a drawer and tells Archie that some people don't like the words in a Christmas card and some people don't like the design. After all of that time, he says that everyone's trying to find a card to express their own personal sentiments. But if you don't have a printing press in the cellar, how can you get a card like that? And Sabrina overhears him and decides to use magic to give all of her friends the ability to create their own Christmas cards. Why should I care? She says to let the finished product express what's in their hearts. Is this gonna backfire? Because I see Veronica, so it could backfire by the Christmas cards being brutally honest. Sadly, the story's boring after this. The cards are based on the characters' one-dimensional personalities, so Jughead's card is edible. I don't know what Betty's card has to do with her though. It's really random. Grundy and Weatherby's cards take too long to read and bore me. So it's not a story anymore after this point. Eventually it ends with a janitor telling Moose to give up trying to spell Christmas, because he's the forced stupidity character. All this story was about was Sabrina making sure that her friends can create their own Christmas cards. Sabrina's Christmas Magic, issue 196. Sabrina tells Hilda that when she was little, she was never told about Santa Claus, according to this story anyways. And Hilda says she didn't tell her about him because he isn't real. But I'm guessing he is in this story, so I wish I knew the real reason for why she didn't tell her about him. Witches would know Santa was real. Sabrina thinks there are a lot of questions about him that keep popping into her mind, and there's only one way to get the answers. I assume we'll learn what those questions are, or else the writer's lazy. I assume those questions are, like, how does he make sense? She casts a spell to go to the land of icicles. I assume that a part of the spell is she doesn't instantly freeze to death, or at least get hypothermia. Surprisingly, instead of her meeting Santa right away, she sees a boy in trouble in the sea and saves him from a whale, and asks him to tell her where Santa lives, as the writer unrealistically has him talk in broken English just because he's an Eskimo. He says there is no Santa, and Sabrina thinks the magic of childhood is gone because he said that. She keeps being told Santa isn't real, and I guess she casts a spell so that the guy flying for the Air Force would be calm enough to talk to her as if it was totally normal that she was flying. He apologizes, knowing her name, and says that they fly raider patrols all over the North Pole and never saw Santa. Sabrina says there's only one possibility left, and she thinks for some reason that this will be her most dangerous adventure, and if she misuses her magic, she'll never return. If she turns out to be wrong, then that's just a cheap way of getting the audience excited. She gets dizzy for no reason and sees something through the haze, which predictably, because it's a kids' comic, is Santa's workshop. I'm expected to believe that she's the first person to ever see him. I know witches are portrayed as evil in this comic most of the time, but still, other witches would have discovered him before this point out of sheer curiosity. Sabrina asks why no one's been allowed to see him before. He didn't say no one was allowed to. Santa irritates me, saying that Christmas is based on faith, and if you can see something, it doesn't take faith to believe in it. Christmas was originally based on the pagan holiday of Saturnalia, and nowadays it's just a consumerist holiday about buying gifts. And it's about appreciating your family, which has nothing to do with Christianity either. I'm expected to believe that a lack of faith has magically stopped all of the work here at the North Pole. Oh great, is this writer a Christian? I'm seeing a lot of bias in the story. This is very out of place. There's no logical reason for why Santa would have this problem. I'm pretty sure throughout most of history, only kids believed in Santa, and most people didn't. So I guess his workshop used to run off the kids' belief in him, but that doesn't make any sort of sense. He says that his workers have left in despair, so he has no one to build the toys. I guess the purpose of this plot is to lie to kids reading the comic that Santa exists. Because I doubt the writer believes in him. It's still not fair to treat the kids who don't believe in him as if they're the bad guys, because they have good, smart reasons to not believe in him. Why would he live in the North Pole instead of living with other magical people like him? There's no sign of him anywhere. Kids are being portrayed as the bad guys for having sound reasoning skills. And it's not explained that that's why they don't believe in him, because they're the strawmen. Sabrina gives life to the toys he already has so that they can make more toys. When I thought she'd conjure up a bunch of elves to work for him who wouldn't leave whenever they feel like it. You'd think the workers of his shop would have still wanted to work for him, regardless of whether people believed in them, because they'd just be happy they were making people happy with gifts at all. But apparently they're just selfish and want attention. Too much of the story is wasted on seeing the results of Sabrina's spell when it was explained just fine in one panel. Sabrina gives Santa a pep talk. She says that when she looks in the physical world, she sees that when the oceans and rivers get low enough, the tide changes, and that can happen in the spiritual world too. And somehow, this complete non-sequitur has him realize he needs more faith too, and the tide is changing with no evidence. It's not like Santa warped to some kids, videotaped them saying that they believe in Santa, and showed it to him. That'd make more sense. He sets off, and so does she, and the story ends with Sabrina saying nonsensically that believing is seeing. It's only seeing in the sense that if you imagine something, you're using your mind's eye to see it. And you can do that with your eyes closed. It's annoying that Hilda was portrayed as wrong here when she has a good point. We shouldn't believe stuff just because we're told to. Because that logic leads to believing conspiracy theories with no real evidence. In the next story, Sabrina feels sorry for Jughead's dog for missing all the fun and excitement of Christmas sleeping. She interferes with his life by making him a human for the holidays. But that'll just freak him out. Apparently, she just had him not being freaked out be a part of the spell. There's no reason she'd have him look the way he does instead of actually making him look human. He asks for a chocolate soda from Pop-Teat. Why can't you say that people not realizing it's a dog and hot dog is also part of the spell? The story is needlessly confusing. Jughead finds him familiar. Ethel shows up right away because she already heard about the new guy in town and wants the first crack at him. She somehow expects me to believe all the other girls already have boyfriends. How small is Riverdale? It always looks like a city, not a village, because people are always walking around and there's roads in the background. After being unhappy because she thinks Hot Dog's a hippie, she decides that he's better than no date at all. And Sabrina decides to make Ethel's Christmas brighter too. So she brainwashes Hot Dog into deciding to order something for her and flattering her, offering her a bunch of flowers. Sabrina was being nice to Hot Dog earlier, but brainwashing him like this instead of letting him live life the way he wants is crossing a line. Sabrina uses magic to make Pop-Teat play the violin, but Hot Dog howls because the high pitch is too much for his ears, which were inexplicably not human ears. And she magically makes him vanish instead of brainwashing him into being okay with the music while she's at it. Ethel cries about this and says she'll never get him out of her mind. The story ends with Hot Dog in his normal form going towards her as she wonders if she'll ever see him again. Sabrina should have erased her memory of what happened. In the next story, Betty arrives at Sabrina's house and says she's gonna sing Christmas carols tonight pointlessly in the hopes that it'll spread peace and goodwill, and not bother people. And Sabrina has a lame idea of fun and wants to go with her. I don't remember ever meeting Christmas carolers. I guess Stella's invisible to mortals here too, or they'd be asking why she's dressed like that. Sabrina sees a zap when she's trying to get her coat, and realizes that Della's here. So she reluctantly turns her friends down and cries. Della nags her, which she did way more in the comics than in the show. And Hilda blames Sabrina's friends for her goodness. Sabrina wouldn't tell Della she'll try to be good after apologizing. The writer makes a mistake and has Sabrina call her cousin Uncle Ambrose once again. So apparently this takes place in a parallel universe. He's not only Sabrina's cousin, he's also Hilda's cousin. He tells her that Harvey's here and she thanks him. Harvey tells her she looks nice, which is surprisingly nice of him, and she thanks him. He wishes it would snow for some reason, and Sabrina thinks that because she's a witch, she feels so left out on Christmas as Harvey's singing. Harvey says nicely in a place where everyone looks poor that if he had a lot of money, he'd spread some Christmas joy here. Sabrina wishes that she was allowed to use magic to help them, and cries. She must have assumed one of the spy witches would see her help them. Then there's a bank robbery, and Sabrina gets kidnapped by the robbers because with her in the car, the cops won't shoot. So this idea is older than I think. The car goes into the sad neighborhood that Harvey went through, so she casts a spell on someone in the back seat to make him feel the urge to share the wealth. So he throws the marked banknotes at the people around him who might not be able to keep the money anyways because banknotes are marked. Now anyways. So really, if Dell finds out this happened, she'd also end up finding out that they wouldn't get to keep the money anyways because the cops would track it down and count their disappointment as a bad deed. Maybe we're supposed to think this is a universe where banknotes aren't marked. And since the guy who threw the money gets fought with, that's also a bad deed. The police show up and complain that they can't possibly recover the money now, forgetting that banknotes are marked. I guess the writer didn't know that, or things weren't like that in the 70s. So after Sabrina got some bank robbers arrested, which Della might see as a bad deed because they really hate prison, she tells Della that she made some men lose all their money at Christmas time and caused them to fight and get taken to jail. I love that the writer had the self-awareness to actually realize how her attempt at a good deed could be seen as evil. And Sabrina smiles at the end, so she was being clever and knew how they'd take it. There's a comedy page where Sabrina asks what Christmas means to you, so the Archie characters react in predictable ways you'd expect from their one-note characters. Nothing to really comment on here. Archie is glad there's no school. Weatherby should really tell people what he actually wants for Christmas. And Ethel loves mistletoe, even though nobody kisses her under it. But I still like her more than Betty. Did you know Christmas wasn't actually his birthday? In the next story, Hilda says that there's a cute little brewing pot, and people are throwing money into it. She says she's gonna get in the act and uses magic, zapping up a cauldron in front of a mortal so that strangers could fill it up with money. Sabrina tells her that people aren't gonna put money in her pot because they're putting money in that small pot for charity, for the poor and sick, so that people can have a good Christmas. Hilda casts a spell to make her and Sabrina salvation sisters. She calls someone sister, and she says that people are giving generously, but the needs are great. Hilda says she'll take care of that in front of her, and brainwashes people into wanting to give money more, even if they already did. I can immediately see a problem with this, because what if they end up giving away the money they actually need, and end up unable to buy their gifts? No wonder Dale isn't stopping them. Someone says that they'll be able to buy a lot with this, and the kids at the orphanage will love all these toys. This is one of those confusing stories where Hilda is written like Zelda, or Sabrina. I was waiting for her to not get the appeal of Christmas and do some hexing. Someone asks how they're gonna prepare all this food. Hilda once again uses magic to summon a feast, and all she does is say that she doesn't know how to thank them. She's oddly calm about meeting a bunch of witches. I guess she already knew about them. Hilda talks about magic right in front of her, and the last page is completely wasted and out of place, clearly. This really dates the comic. No one explains how this squares with Sabrina's witchcraft, by the way. In the next story, Sabrina asks us if we ever wondered how Christmas was celebrated in the animal kingdom. She uses magic and says to the audience that they're going to visit some special friends. And we see some animals that look like Archie and Jughead in a cheap ploy to try to get me invested. But because Sabrina isn't doing anything in the story, I still don't care. It's about the Archie characters acting exactly like you'd expect them to. And yet they're animals of various species, and they're all fine with being together. Yeah, I don't care about describing the series of gag panels fully, because this story doesn't care about making sense, so the plot is just pointless to experience. They want to have a Christmas party despite being animals, and play some games, and it somehow expects me to take it seriously when Dilton the science guy of all people starts ranting that Christmas is what caused people to come together and love each other, and everyone was just in the jungle fighting each other before that point, completely ignoring that other religions exist. People learned to like each other thousands of years before Christmas, and liked their families, and most people did not live in the jungle in BC times. But that's just stating the obvious. Clearly there's no reasoning with the person who wrote this if he believes this. I'm pretty sure his name is Al. Bottom line is, why did Sabrina cause this story to happen? The whole story is just confusing. It could have easily been told without the characters looking like animals. Then there's a series of gag panels where Sabrina asks her friends what they'd wish for, and all of the answers are obvious because of the one-dimensional personalities of the characters. Reggie wants a twin brother so that he could admire his own appearance, completely unaware of the fact that clearly he'd just be desperate for attention from everyone even more if he had to constantly try to compete with his twin brother and stand out. Grundy wishes a janitor would notice her, and Dilton hopes that Man would stop asking how and start asking why. But he likes science. Wouldn't he want people to ask both how and why? He's not a philosopher, he's a scientist. Oh, and after this is a tree named Obadiah, which I actually have and reviewed. Shockingly, that's actually the last story that the Sabrina Complete Collection bothers to show me. Well, that's pathetic. I thought it'd at least have every 70s story. You'd think they'd release a lot more complete collections. So it'll take forever to review every Sabrina story from the 70s, because most of the issues of Archie's TV Laugh-Out aren't on the site. And they aren't on another site that I checked. And I'm not made of money. Every time I run out of money, which is after like just a few issues, I have to wait a month to order more. That wasn't even close to complete.